Happy New Year. I'd like to have a brief discussion with you about liberalism and multiculturalism. I've posted many videos that talk about how we even see the world differently. But there's one question that I always ask. What about family? We think about migration, for example. I'm here in Europe, and so much about the politics of today is about migration and Islam. Now, because I don't present myself as Muslim, I've been subject to some of the most Islamophobic things that people have to say in their own spaces. Because I don't present myself as Arab, I've heard some of the most anti-Arab things that I could ever say, I could ever hear. And as opposed to identifying with those comments, I often think, well, what do those people say about people who look like me when I'm not around? I ask this because I come from a multicultural family. I come from two parents who are very different nationalities, or different nationalities, very different or different. They're just different. And I inherited both passports. But because I have I would say the privilege of having been born in America, when people ask me where I'm from, I'm American. Now, I say this because I live here in Europe, and when I ask people of color here in Europe where they're from, often they don't know how to respond, or the answer for them is not a very settled one. And you can see this. Go to Britain and ask a young person of color, where are you from? And they might tell you a place that they've never actually been. They may say that they identify with that place, partially because they don't have any sense of belonging where they are. Now, people may say that they must assimilate. And for me, I don't understand what that means, because I have a multicultural family. That means we have multinationalities, multiple races, multiple religions, multiple classes, multiple educational levels. We all on both sides have a so-called migratory background. So, I'm a Southern Black person. So my family certainly, as soon as they could, left the plantations, went north, dispersed all throughout the country, and gave birth to the Black culture that you see in here today. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just turn on any radio in any part of the world and you'll hear my people, or people copying my people. And so while that makes me very proud, it still makes me say to so-called conservatives, because it's always conservatives who are talking about traditionalism, who are talking about ours, who really forward the politics of them and us. Well, when you say them and us and they and those people, what do you actually say to a multicultural person such as myself, when my mother made very clear that, for example, the fact that my grandparents have a fraction of the education that I have doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. And it doesn't mean that I would ever disrespect them or where they come from. And the same goes for other parts of my family. I don't present myself as Muslim. I'm not Muslim. Most people assume that I'm Christian just because of where I come from. And so people have said the most Islamophobic things in front of me, not knowing that, I've felt some of the most profound sense of belonging from Muslim people in Muslim countries, especially at a time and a place when that was really meaningful for me, because I didn't experience that where I actually came from. So again, it's a very simple question. What say you when you talk about them, us, assimilation, migration, and those migrants and those immigrants and Brexit? Just the other day I was at a party, and there were at least half the people in the room were not British. And of those who weren't British, most of them were all European. And there was a British sounding person who was, spewing this pro-Brexit rhetoric based on the reality of it: immigration. Nothing to do with the EU telling anybody what to do, but immigration. And the boldness with which this person says these things says that they genuinely haven't thought about a multicultural person. They haven't considered, what about that British person whose parents, or at least one parent, may be from Europe? What should they do? And should they tear their families apart? What about the angst caused and just having to worry about, because there's so much worry about what will Brexit mean for Europeans living in UK, and what will Brexit mean for British people living in Europe. Similarly to Trump and his wall, the irony of it is, I think everyone knows it. It's a metaphor for a kind of politics. The wall may never get built, even if it does. As they say, it didn't work for China, and many people say the Great Wall of China. I've heard it in China called a mass grave, and I think that if we build a wall in America, it will be a mass grave, but would also be a symbol for people to climb over. But none of those people have ever had anything to say genuinely about multiculturalism. And when they do talk about multiculturalism, they really start the politics of them and us, they and them and those people and their culture. But it still doesn't answer the one question: what you gonna do when your child comes home with someone of a different culture? Because this is gonna happen. So again, what say conservatives about multicultural people? Not multiculturalism per se, but an actual person who embodies multiplicity, as I do. What say you? What world do you actually want to fashion? Please hit me up, because I genuinely don't get it.